Kwana, over to you.
Good morning, Ria, and thank you so much. Indeed, a sad one there in Kebbi State where 25 young schoolgirls were kidnapped. I'm tired of all these headlines because we go on saying, and we see a response from the federal government now saying that, you know, they are making attempts to rescue these girls. They condemn the killings, the same old. I'm wondering when we will shift from being reactive to being proactive because, you know, these people are not ghosts. They follow the roads. And we believe that security is supposed to be on the road to protect citizens. Number one duty of every government is to protect life and property. And we shouldn't be having this kind of headlines every time. I'm also glad that, you know, this kind of prompt came also from the U.S. Government where he, you know, challenged the government to investigate these killings, although he named it as a genocide. But it kind of put the government, the Nigerian government, on its toes, you know, to check security. I always tell people that, you know, it's not a religious thing. It's a multifaceted, you know, security challenge. And now it's time for government to wake up to check this. These are young schoolgirls. I imagine the trauma that this will put on them, you know, the stress it will put on them and all that. We shouldn't be having these headlines all the time. What do you think?
I quite agree with you that over 50 families are traumatized because when you say 25 girls, you can imagine the connection, the network and all that are traumatized at this moment. And this is not the best of time for those people. And it's a sad one for us in Nigeria. But good enough that the president has ordered and the security men are convened. Therefore, we hope that they will to get these guys. That is, the report said they came in around 4 p.m., and which means we must upscale our security, our vigilance, so that we don't give room for this kind of things to happen because it becomes embarrassing. You remember what happened to the Chibok girls, and this is happening. It becomes embarrassing to government. So let's hope that we'll get these girls back.
Well, that's the
safe
prayer,
and sound,
safe and sound.
Exactly.
Thank you. Well, let's move into what we have for you today. As the city stares to life and the news cycles gather momentum, we're here with the top stories, the sharp insights, and the timely updates that stir your day. This is FCT Brief, and thanks for joining us. Africa stands at a defining moment across the continent. The democratic landscape is shifting, sometimes boldly, sometimes turbulently, yet steadily shaping a new narrative of political maturity and continental ambition. As nations reposition themselves for stronger global influence, democracy remains both the testing ground and the launchpad for Africa's future leadership. But beneath this promising horizon lie deep contradictions. Recent elections in Tanzania, Cameroon, and Cote d'Ivoire have exposed the fragile underbelly of democratic practice, where state power, coercion, and electoral manipulation continue to threaten the integrity of the ballot. This crisis has only raised questions about governance, but also challenges Africa's claim to a new democratic awakening.
Still, the story is not entirely bleak. Across civil societies, youth movements, regional blocs, and independent institutions, a renewed demand for transparency, accountability, leadership is gaining ground. This push from below is redefining what democracy should mean for Africa, not merely as a ritual of voting, but as a genuine path to stability, growth, and global relevance. This morning on FCT Brief, we will probe how Africa can reconcile these contradictions, balancing democratic struggles with its ambition to stand as a decisive global player in geopolitics, economics, and multilateral leadership. Can the continent strengthen its democratic foundations while navigating internal pressures and external expectations? Joining us to unravel these issues is Ademola Oshodi, a global affairs analyst who will help us examine the crossroads at which Africa now stands and what it will take for democracy to truly reshape the continent for global leadership. Thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me.
All right. Yeah, just like we said in that brief, Africa is at a crossroad. We've seen what happened in some African countries, Cameroon and all those countries. And to some extent in Africa, we will say that elections have become just mere rituals. Election is like government keep defending. It's an opportunity to defend themselves, not because they want it to be a referendum of their performance. Now, it has not placed us in good light before the global community, and we must change the narrative. Some blame leaders, some blame followers. How do we get out of this vicious circle we are in and begin to reshape Africa?
Well, thank you. I question the fact that not all government or elections in Africa are as bad as you portrayed. We've had some challenging elections in recent times, especially in Cameroon, also in Tanzania, unfortunately. But the trajectory of Africa's democracy has been moving up, has been improving. It has been improving. There's obviously many places where things are not going to plan. Things are not going the way the electorate expect it to be. Leaders staying longer than their term, people manipulating election, and unfortunately mass killing of protesters and electorates and voters. So it's in many ways it shows a bleak picture. I mean, and in another way it shows optimism, hope. If you look at Africa about 30 years ago, it was almost all, apart from maybe a few countries, almost all military rule. Now, in many cases, people will say, well, military rule was replaced with dictatorship or authoritarian rule. You know, it is not as it seems. Democracy has been a huge challenge for the budding continent, especially regarding ensuring institutions are built and things are done in place for the next generation and for investments and for stability of the country. Now, if you look at what's even happening next door in Benin Republic, the president has extended his term by another 2 years, so basically he's doing 7 years. He didn't go to the electorate, he went to the Senate to get this approved. This is, rather unusual. But what Nigeria can do as a leader in West Africa and in Africa in general is to ensure we have our own house in order. We keep reforming to ensure we have the right things in place for elections, for a free press, because elections, democracy is just elections. There's also free press. There's also ensuring that the judiciary is free and fair. It's also ensuring that people can speak and challenge authority. They can protest in a civil, law-abiding way. So we need to ensure that we build those strong institutions in Nigeria as a mirror for not just West Africa, but the continent of Africa. And I'll tell you this much, even for the black race. Mm-hmm. There's this DNA scientist that just died about a few weeks ago. He won a Nobel Prize for discovering DNA or how the formation of DNA. This man said that he questions whether black people can actually rule themselves, whether black people have the capability of governing themselves. And people condemned him, and he was disgraced out of his office. But it puts a question and says, we need to ensure people don't look at us in a way that we can't govern ourselves. Mm-hmm. Europe, Asia, Southern America have made progress in democracy. Yes, Africa is a relatively young place when it comes to democracy. Since the 60s, 70s, other countries have had this experience for hundreds of years. Some even less than Africa, but they're doing well. So we need to ensure that we keep those institutions built, reformed, and ensure there's accountability, for the electorate and for the future generations. The youth.
I like the fact that you touched on the narrative, which is sending the idea or projecting an idea that Africans can govern themselves, because democracy is perceived to be imported from the West, and its application in Africa seems to be a bit messy and inconsistent. Now, I would like to ask, should the continent redesign its own democratic model to reflect its own realities and social structures?
That's a great question. That's been around for a while. It's hard to determine that. If you look at what's happening in Rwanda, there's no real clear democracy. We have a minority ethnic group governing over a majority, and it's been doing it excellently for close to 30 years now, and it's working well. It's working well in other, Rwanda is the biggest example in other places. So authoritarian rule, dictatorship, people say this is what works for Africa. And it could, but what about the multiple ethnic groups that may have a majority or may want to have a say, or the young people that have different ideas on how things are, or even just build institutions? Yes, okay, it works well, but how things are just contained. Things are like in a I don't know if you should know this as a pressure cooker. Things can explode because things have been submerged. People cannot talk, people cannot question, and if you do that, there's repercussions for that. So what's the question? What's the answer? Is it, do we sacrifice our freedom and ability to choose our leader over development? And if that's the case, how sustainable is that? How much does that show for the people that are urging and really, really, yearning for freedom to express themselves in so many ways, and you're telling them, forget your own individual right for the community right? That's a challenge between communitarian and cosmopolitan philosophy. So I do not agree with that. I believe we can look at examples of India. We can look at examples of other multicultural places, multi-ethnic places, whereby they've come together to rule themselves. Democracy is tough, but it's really the best way to get representation. The key is progressive. You keep progressing each election cycle until you finally get a fine specimen.
It's a positive note, you note that it's progressive, but we'll discuss more about that when we come back from this short break. Don't go anywhere, there's more, stay with us. Thank you for staying with us. Now we'll continue our conversation on reshaping Africa's democracy.
Yeah. Let me go this way. Now, has Africa actually become the world's biggest laboratory, in the sense that a lot of times in Africa, we subscribe to issues when the global West endorses that particular idea. Not like the democracy is embraced by the global West. So for us in Africa, it is good. In Rwanda, minority keep ruling because the global West favors the person in there. So it is good. Now, when will Africa take a stand and say, look, we have come of age. We want to drop our own agenda by ourselves. We want to lead our own continent by ourselves. But can they stand the global West? And what should we do if we must stand them?
Well, the global West would only be concerned about Africa when it's their interest, when it suits their interest, whether democracy brings stability for them to trade properly and to avoid migration across the Atlantic or the Mediterranean or the Sahara to their country. They would also ensure that we don't kill each other and put a lot of pressure on their people for them to intervene. A lot of it is in their interest. A lot of them have also historical linkages with Africa, colonial, British, the French, Portuguese. But we need to see Africa as our own responsibility. And as much as we need the West for development, and also in many cases, as Jesus said, we need them also to show where we're going, how they did their democracy and the path that we should take and build those institutions. It's important that Africa takes hold of things. We take hold, and how do we take hold of things? We build those institutions. We ensure people are held accountable and people respect laws and civil arrangements. We respect human rights. We ensure democracy, elections especially, are improved. It's not going to be good even in American elections, there are always questions. But we improve every election cycle. I mean, in Nigeria, for instance, since 1999, 2003, it was easy to rig elections. Now you need to be really smart. You need to form alliances. You cannot take things for granted. Incumbent has been defeated in a Nigerian election. Never been happened before. So that is progress for us. So that's how I would say Nigeria as a mirror to the West African sub-region, to Africa, shows the leadership, its natural leadership as the giant of Africa. We have all the major democracies also in South Africa. We have, even good examples in Botswana. Ghana is a darling of the West. We need to ensure we hold those oases of good governance and progress in democracy as a light for the other African countries. We cannot accept what's happening we should not accept what's happening in all the places where democracy tenets have been questioned, whether it's in Tanzania, whether it's in Cameroon, whether, elongating a power or postponing election. We should not accept that. And we should not come out and insult them or annoy them, but we should work on the ground to tell them this is not where it is, and also lead by a good example. The West will only respect us when we keep our house in order. As much as Rwanda is a darling for the West, Rwanda was also an embarrassment for the West. They let the genocide happen in 1994. So they have a lot of guilt from their own end. But the leadership in Rwanda has shown tremendous capability in bringing the country forward in progress and development, and it should really be commended for that. But to what price? Yes.
Very valid question. And speaking about respect, Mr. Oshodi, I would like to ask, Africa has long demanded a permanent seat on the UN Security Council, with Nigeria championing this bid. Now, if the continent succeeds, how dramatically will it shift global power dynamics?
Well, it gives us a voice on the table. And I'll tell you this, if you're not on the table, you're on the menu. You have to be there to tell them that you matter. You have to be there to say, look, my vote, my participation, my involvement in whatever is happening in Africa or in the Middle East or in Venezuela, matters. We are all part of this global village. So Nigeria, as a leader in Africa, deserves that seat on that table. I hope there'll be at least 2 African countries on that table. But the United Nations has also been seen to be quite handicapped with the big powers, the 5 big powers, especially the Americans and the Chinese and the Russians, not accepting resolutions or even, as they call it, stopping the resolutions, vetoing resolutions. What they're suggesting for Africa is to be on that Security Council, but without veto power. That's nonsense. Either you're in or you're out. We don't want cosmetic participation. So that's something that I think the leadership in Africa, should think about before, if they do offer us that. But it's important that we're on that table. It's important that we have a voice. It's important that we ensure that we have a stake and we voice that stake in this global village. We can't be having crisis in somewhere in DRC Congo and the big powers are deciding our fate in the African continent, or maybe in issues of climate change, which affects Africa more than any other part of the world. It meets less, but it affects us more. So we need to be there to say, look, this affects us, let's design it this way, or we'll stop it, we'll veto it. So it's important we're engaged. Yes.
Now, when we talk about having a voice on the global scene, how about if we rejig what we already have, the continental shelves we already have? We have the AU, we have ECOWAS, we have the SADC. And these are, to a large extent, they're just mere names, and we do not feel their impact when it comes to Africa affairs. One of the countries recently, AU already issued a statement before the people started protesting. They had to withdraw the statement because it's like we have bodies that keep endorsing government. No matter who they are, they keep endorsing. Their voice is not strong. How do we build continental institutions that are assertive, that even the UN, because the AU has a strong voice, they want to listen to Africa. How do we, as Africans, build such body?
Yes, that's a really good question. It's tough. Many times even the AU struggles for money from countries that it's owed. Many times it's compromised by big countries, and many times the political will to intervene. For instance, AU has not done much in DRC Congo with the rivalry with the M23 Rwanda against DRC Congo.
And even in Sudan.
Sudan is a huge tragic example. So how do we see that as an effective organization? But I think we just keep pushing at it. They can question the same thing about also regional organizations in Asia, the ASEANic group, the even European Union, the OAS, the Organization of American States in Southern America, quite ineffective without the role of either the Americans or the Brazilians. So they need strong countries in those places to take leadership. In Africa, we have Nigeria, we have South Africa, we have Ethiopia, and Egypt as big players, and they should come together and decide many cases where things are. Just like in Europe. In Europe, you have Germany, you have France, and in some cases you had the European Union. So you had UK before they left. So they decided the path forward, and in many ways they, almost had the veto. So we need those strong countries to lead the way and should lead by example. ECOWAS, I feel very, very enduring to ECOWAS. I'm very proud of the achievement of ECOWAS as a regional body for bringing peace and stability in Liberia and Sierra Leone. Nigeria's leadership there has been tremendously approved.
Mr. Oshodi, I would like you to hold that thought because we need to take a quick commercial break now. Don't go anywhere. We'll still have more. Stay with us.
Good, tasty food is worth living for. Worried about your oil every time you enjoy your favorite meal? Introducing Smart Balance. Smart Balance rice bran oil is rich in gamma-oryzanol. Several studies suggest that gamma-oryzanol may contribute to the reduction of bad cholesterol. Golden Terra Smart Balance oil. Good food, no worries.
Guys, food is ready.
Cook to impress.
Power Oil Light. Light enough for movement. Real enough for taste. Power Oil. My choice for my family. They always come back for seconds. I know why. Power Oil. My choice for my family.
Thank you for staying with FCT Brief. Now, as we wrap up this conversation, West and Central Africa have become the cool belts of the continent. Are these cool proof that democracy has failed, or is it a response to a corrupt civilian rule?
This coups, various factors attribute to it. It shows the fact that things are getting tough for West Africans. I could talk about West Africa in the fact that I would say climate change has been ravishing the Sahel. A lot of people have lost their livelihood. A lot of people have migrated. There are less opportunities for people. Therefore, they're vulnerable for influences and movement, etc. Even herders and farmer clashes. A lot of it is based on climate change, but a lot of it is also based on weak institutions.
Sorry.
The states, in many ways, have failed many of the African countries. They have not been there for their people, providing security, providing livelihood, and many times providing hope. So we, the military, the soldiers, take advantage of this, come in. There's also ethnic people that feel grieved or feel superior, that they feel they should do. Our black people white black people should be governing them. There's minority rights, etc. So these are the complex issues regarding the causes formation for people to create crises and then the military to intervene. It is not sustainable. Military rule does not provide any solution. It only just aggravates things. You bring in foreign mercenaries and think you're going to solve your problem. Right now, things are dire. Things are worse for those three West African countries that left ECOWAS: Niger, Burkina Faso, and Mali. Mali, in capital, is almost being encircled right now with the insurgents, with the I would say the Islamists. So it does not solve anything. We need to ensure we build institutions that will hold people accountable. That's the way forward for West Africa. That's the way forward for Africa. And we need countries like Nigeria to show leadership by example, and also leadership on the ground, ensure we keep this thing from affecting us, because what happens to your neighbor can easily affect you in your own country.
There was a time Nigeria led the ECOMOG, and the West African sub-region Nigeria was actually assertive in that space. Outside the use of military might, how else can Nigeria take the lead in ECOWAS and in Africa? What can we do to assert ourselves, not just as a big brother by name, but truly as the giants?
Nigeria is doing a lot already. The President, Bola Ahmed Tinubu, was a two-term chairman of ECOWAS. So we brought a lot of stability after so many coups that happened shortly after he came in. That's big. Nigeria takes a leadership role, financing and training, even hosting the ECOWAS headquarters in Abuja here. But what I think Nigeria could do more is to ensure we bring as much as possible participation of even these rebellious countries. We speak with them, and we speak with them, continuously engage them and tell them, come back into the fold. Let's work together to solve this problem. We're doing this. We should do it more. We should have a tremendous amount of involvement and advice from Western powers. They hate the French there. They don't like the Americans and things like that. But we need their involvement. They've known this country. They've known this place. They built these countries, this former colonial powers. So we need engagement of everybody, stakeholders, to ensure that we find solutions to this. Their path of being rebellious, leaving ECOWAS, bringing foreign mercenaries has not worked. It shows on ground, So now we need to just tell them, enough is enough. Let's work together. And it will happen. I can assure you what happened. They will come back to the fold because their path is not working. Yeah.
Well, we live in a digital world, and many African democracies still resist transparency tools like e-voting, open budgeting system, and real-time audits. Why is democracy transparency selectively applied?
It is based on, I think, on development from each area. In some countries, they even have, in Africa, they have diaspora voting. We don't have that in Nigeria. We don't have that in many other countries. So it's development of each country and each path. So I think everybody eventually will get their own way that suits them. E-voting, I think we need to have strong electronic infrastructure to ensure things are right. We need to ensure people trust the system. In last election, people questioned, even though the election was relatively free and fair, judged by foreign bodies. People still question it. There's no election in Nigeria that would happen without the competitors question it. So we need to have faith and confidence in our system before we can now transition to a more digital, transparent, easy way. I would love to be able to vote in a very, not necessarily in my comfort of my room, but at least in a very easy process. To pick up my PVC, go to the place and vote without any much hassle. But we would do all this because we're trying to avoid issues that will question the credibility of elections. And in many ways, I told somebody a few days ago that we do everything to avoid rigging. We do everything to ensure the elections are going right, But in the West, if you see them vote in the UK, it is such an easy process. Why? Because institutions are built and strong. They know that if you do anything, if you rig, you try anything wrong, you'll be held accountable. But we know in Nigeria, if you do anything wrong with election day or leading to election, you may not be held accountable. You may get away with it, or maybe the foot soldiers will be the ones held accountable. But the big men, will escape justice. So we do everything to avoid that. We spend so much money to make the election credible, to avoid those mishaps. Because if those mishaps happen, many times people are not held accountable. Of course, things are getting better now with the reforms and the justice system and the police, so we see progress in that. But we need to ensure institutions are built, so you just take a paper with your ID and you go vote. And you know full well that your vote is going to be counted, and the process is going to be free and fair.
Mr. Ademola Oshodi, I must say my key takeaway here is we look forward to a time where Africa, most especially Nigeria, begin to lead by the power of example and also, reshape the global narrative that is being had of us. Thank you so much for your time with us on the program. It's a delight speaking with you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for being a part of our conversation. We'll now hand you over to Lagos, where Ria and the rest of the team are standing by to continue with the rest of the show.
Thank you so much, TJ Su. We're here standing by. Mungo Day. Thank you, Abuja.